Hi everybody. So today I'm going to do a video on 4 interviews I did in the course of my information technology degree. 2 of these are internships. They were things I did before I graduated. And then 2 are full-time jobs. I hadn't quite graduated, but I was just about to get the degree when I did these. So let's go ahead and start with number 1. Okay, so first one, they're called FIS, and they're actually a pretty big company. They do banking software, and they run infrastructure for banks. Now, yeah, you might be thinking like Office Space, but I didn't end up taking this role, so I can't actually tell you if that's true. It didn't look like Office Space as far as the environment, I can tell you that. It was in a big building, and the office and workspaces were immaculate, very beautiful, very well kept. Everything looked very expensive. So I was interviewed by 2 men, but first, there was a manager and then a technical person. Those were the 2 guys that basically interviewed me. Now, one of the first questions I was asked was, what is the biggest challenge that you've dealt with? And I told them that was the server I've been working on, getting the certificate to work. I told them about how I struggled with it. I stayed up late nights. I called the domain hosting service for support on it, and how I actually, in the end, had to save off everything I had and completely reinstall the server in order to get it to work. Now, that might sound like I'm admitting I'm not good at something, but it was actually an excellent answer, because these things happen in IT, and as a sysadmin, this is definitely something that you might have to do or deal with if things go south, and they will go south on you. So that was, a good thing. The next thing I did was I talked about what I did with my server. It was what we call a XAMPP stack, which is basically a LAMP stack. I can get into more technical detail on that in another video, but it's just a group of technologies that can host a server. Now, what I did is I installed this on my own computer and actually worked with my home router in order to put my website live on the internet. Now, that came with a lot of struggles, and I wanted to put a security certificate on it, so that is where I had to deal with the certificate, and it was, kind of a challenge. I had a bunch of stuff on the website, so I couldn't just wipe it easily. I had to make sure if I did, all of that work would be maintained. So that's why that was an excellent answer to the question, is because if you're ever dealing with this, of course it will be much more work than what I actually had on my little thing. But, it was something, and it meant something to me, and I cared about, retaining the data. So that was an excellent example that I gave them that actually went along with, what they actually do. They also asked me what my favorite thing in IT is. I kind of lied here, although I would say you never truly lie in an interview. You always just take the best answer that's true when you're given a question. And for me, I said the server stuff is the coolest stuff. And that is a true answer. I loved working on the server, and at this point that was the most fun thing I had done, and I was really into it. And actually, even though I'm a developer now, I still have done server stuff at my job, because we have to have like a GitLab type of thing. So I actually still do some of it today, even though it's not my main role, and I still do enjoy it. But the truth is, if I'm looking back on it, if I look at my entire career, programming has always been my favorite thing. At the time though, saying the server stuff has been my favorite was true. So that was my interview at FIS. If you want to know what happened with that, basically I did get an offer with that job, I will say, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Okay, so here's number 2. All right, so number 2 is a company called ServiceNow. Now, if you haven't heard of ServiceNow, it's kind of a complicated thing. They run a cloud development platform. This is a little bit like AWS these days, although back then it wasn't as big of a thing. So ServiceNow is kind of this software development platform that comes with a lot of things already developed for you. And some people just use that stuff that's already been developed. But people like where I work now, we actually develop on top of, that platform. We write applications in it. So I didn't know any of this at the time. All I knew was that they were a software company, and it was for a technical analyst intern role. So that I didn't really know what to make of, and I could see in the job application that customer support was like a big thing, that they wanted that in the requirements, but they also wanted things like knowledge of XML and SQL and JavaScript. So I was really kind of confounded as to what this role is. So it really turned out to be a cloud support role, and I've done another video on just what this is, and I will link it. So without going too far into that, basically it is a role where you support other administrators and developers that work at other companies with this cloud platform. it's really their responsibility to develop their own applications. But if they're developing something and there's something wrong on our side, or they just get really stuck and don't understand something, or having some kind of problem that you can't really figure out what's going on, that's when you get involved. So yes, you do have to know things like JavaScript because they may have written code in JavaScript. You need to know SQL because they're going to be dealing with a SQL database on the ServiceNow side, so you have to be able to look at a database and see, well, what's going on. Now, in truth, you don't really need to know all that, right? Because it's divided into different specializations, but that's one of those things where that's why they have all of it on the resume. You don't actually have to know all of it, and that's something that you need to remember when you're applying to jobs. That sometimes you're working at a big company as an intern here, again, this is an internship, and they're going to kind of see as you go on where you should actually go. So if I was really good at JavaScript, which I was, well, I don't want to say really good, I was pretty good, right? And then not so good at SQL, I would be pushed more towards the JavaScript side, you know, and so that's why it still makes sense to apply for things even if you don't have all of the requirements. Now, this interview was one of the more interesting ones because I remember it as being short and there was not really much technical there. You know, in the interview before this, the FIS interview, there really wasn't much technical either, which got me, but I was asked about different technologies and whatnot. This one, I think what happened was I was basically asked about what I had done, and I dove into all the stuff I had been doing with my server and stuff, what languages I'd used, you know, what stack I used and how I integrated them. And I did that without ranting and raving. That's really important if you're going to go into what you do technically, is don't rant and rave, summarize, but try to say enough to prove that you have done this technically, because that's what they're looking for. They are looking for a good people person to hire. First of all, the manager's trying to feel out, okay, is this person somebody that we can work with, right? Do we want to work with this person every day and see them for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or at least maybe we'll see them within that period of time. So that's the decision they're trying to make, but they also need to know that you actually know what you're doing, because if you don't know what you're doing, to some degree, things are going to be kind of difficult. And the second thing they're doing there is trying to deduce that. Now you can make it really easy for them when you're talking about things if you include a little bit of technical stuff when you talk. But I would say don't go too far into the tech stuff, because then you just start ranting and they can't follow what you're saying, and that doesn't make anyone feel good, right? So you want to just hit on it enough to show them that you know what you're doing. And they may ask you further questions into what you did. You know, technically that's perfect, because now they're asking you to go on, right? They're asking for more details, and that's when you would give them what they want, basically. So I did that. I think the coolest question I got in that interview was, it was basically, what do you want to think that you're good at, or what do you enjoy? That was one question, right? So I don't know how I came up with a zinger of an answer. I think it was because I just watched The Martian and I was a huge fan of it, but my answer was problem solving. And honestly, I think that's probably the most true answer I've ever given to a question in an interview in my life. So that's the answer I gave, and I ended up getting the job offer at this company, as well as at FIS that I talked about before. Now, this was a very hard decision, and I got these offers at about the same time. This was not a position I was expecting to find myself in. It was like, yeah, you can never have too many offers, but I was just looking for somebody to give me a chance, and to have two people saying, we like you, we want to give you a chance, and have to say no to one, that hurt, that was hard. So I made the decision. To be honest, ServiceNow paid more. They had that software company thing going for them. And I don't want to say I'm glad I did, because it's one of those things that you never know what would have happened if you went the other direction. You know, I feel like I'm in a pretty good place now, but who knows where I'd be if I had gone the other direction. So yeah, there's that. So basically, it was a good experience, and I like ServiceNow, and I'm going to do another video where I talk more about ServiceNow. Actually, number 3 coming up here, I'm going to talk quite a bit more about them, because that was an interview for a full-time position there. Okay. All right, so this is my first full-time interview, and this is also with ServiceNow. So this was for a cloud support role at ServiceNow, and this is something I knew a lot about at this point. Now, the way I found the original ServiceNow interview was by going online and doing a application. This time was different. I kind of saw what there was there, and I actually started messaging managers, like emailing them, asking them if I said I was interested in the role, I'd like to apply. Actually, when I applied for this, I didn't message the manager here, and I just applied for it online on their portal, and I got a call within a day or so. I mean, it was pretty darn quick, if I remember. It might have even been less than a day. So, she talked to me, asked me about where I want to, like if I would want to live in California and stuff. That did end up playing into the decision, basically. But I took the interview with them, and this was interesting because I'm already working in the office, right? So to do this interview, we just schedule a time like many other meetings that we've done, and I just go into this conference room with a big screen on the wall and a whole bunch of chairs. Felt long desk, and it felt really empty with just me in it. But on the other side, they were in a conference room with a big table and a bunch of big chairs, and I assume a large TV. And there were like 3 or 4 people there interviewing me. So we went over a few things. First, the technical part, which is the thing that interests me. So it's the thing I remember the most. The first question that the person asked me, the manager, was, "What is this?" So I think this is one of the most excellent questions I've ever been asked in a technical interview, because it's really good for weeding out the people that don't really know what they're doing in JavaScript from people who probably know some of what they're doing in JavaScript. So if you don't know this in JavaScript and many other object-oriented languages, which I made sure in my answer I prefaced that she didn't say in JavaScript, and I said in object-oriented languages, generally the word this refers to the object at hand. Although, I continued, in JavaScript, sometimes it can refer to other things, depending on context. And this is actually a very weird thing in JavaScript. I didn't say that part, but somebody else did in the interview, actually, that it is actually very tricky. But that was just a thing to see, if I said like, what's what, right? What do you mean, what's this? What is what? So only a programmer would really know that. Now after that, I had put on my resume that I knew AngularJS. I was asked about what a model view controller was. I don't want to try to elaborate on that answer because it was a long time ago and I would not give nearly as good of an answer now. I knew it much better back then. I still do Angular, but that conceptual kind of thing has not really stuck with me. I don't want to try to give the same answer I gave. But what I did with that answer was, because I didn't want to get, super technically jargony and technically wordy and jargony, basically, is that I generalized it a little bit, but I made sure I was being specific enough that they knew that I understood the concept, and I think I got past that question pretty well. Now the next thing they did for me technically, by the way, this was, I'd say, the most technical interview I did, was, and I think this is way better than asking me to write an algorithm, because I can just Google algorithms and memorize them, right? So instead what they did was they had a chunk of JavaScript with, I think, not super complicated, like I don't even know if it even had an object in it. It was basically like for loops and if statements. And they asked me, what will this do? Now, this was a real trick question. There were 3 bugs in this code that basically will make it behave in a way that it really doesn't look like it should. And the way that things are written in it, you can see what it is intended to do. So it's easy to look at it and at first think, oh, I see what it's trying to do, right? But I'm like, no, there's got to be a bug in here. So I looked at it. I found the first bug and I said it's going to do this. But I didn't think it was that tricky of a question. So they said, no, not quite. What about, and they said something, right? So I looked at it closer and then I found the second bug, right? And then I said, okay, well, to do this. And then they're like, well, you're getting closer. And then I said, okay. And they said, well, why don't look closely at this thing. And I looked at it and I was like, and it was something on the outside that would make it do something completely different. I was like, because of that, it's going to do that. Now, I felt, well, walking away from that, I didn't feel great because I'm like, I didn't just get it, right? I didn't show them I was that genius. But I think that was actually a good thing because I got, to show them how I think and how I problem solve, and that I can look at a problem and think about it and solve it, even if they did have to move me along a little bit. They understand it's an interview. I'm not sitting at my desk relaxing, looking over it very slowly. They can see me, and I know, they know and I know that the time is ticking in my head, basically. And so that actually turned out really good, I think, because, I'm sure it did. They were impressed with my interview, and they said so. Other than that, there was a question on, like, how have you done dealing with customers? Have you dealt with a difficult one? And I had to be honest and say, not really. Most of them have been pretty good, but I did give an example of one that had been a bit difficult and how I handled it. Now, there was another question that I thought was also really good, which is, what do you do, and this was not really technical, but what do you do when you've reached a point that you really don't know, you're stuck? and you really can't figure it out. And I said, well, first of all, I really do try to figure it out myself. I will go through the documentation. I will look at even, the low level like Java documentation. I will dig through, KB articles. I will dig through Stack Overflow posts, everything. And if I finally get to a point where I feel like, and usually and this is actually what I said, at this point, I'm educated on the problem and I'm just missing something small. That is when I will contact the person that I trust the most, and I will see if they can help me with this problem. And that's pretty much what I said. Best of my memory. I think that was a good answer. So with this, I actually did end up, I was in negotiations with an offer, right? And I had an offer from another company where I work now, but the offer there, the other company was pretty good. So I basically, from my video on area versus salary, I cross-referenced the areas and the salaries, and they basically at ServiceNow, and just to let you know, at ServiceNow they will ask you how much you want to get paid. So just a heads up, that's kind of a hard question to get if you're not expecting it. So I had done the research ahead of time, and I knew they were going to do that because when I got the job at ServiceNow as an intern, they asked me the same thing, right? And I actually shot low. So this time I looked it up and I decided what it would have to be, and I gave it to them. And I knew it was probably pretty high, even considering that the job was in California. So just to let you guys know, you can give a too high number where they will say, sorry, we don't want to give you the job. We don't want to give you, a job with salary that you don't think is enough. So that can happen. All right, number 4. Okay, number 4. So number 4 is the big GO. Yep, I'm talking Google. Yes, I did interview at Google. So the role I interviewed for was an IT internship. Now this was not actually an internship, and actually the way I found it was I thought it was a college internship, and I actually applied like it was about a year ago when I was doing this, and it turned out to be a full-time job that is a 2-year thing where you do rotations full-time, and they try to find something you're good at with somebody that will hire you in Google. Now, of course, that's not, guaranteed. So I was interested in this. I mean, this is Google, right? This was more of a help desk type role where you also spend time learning new technologies, but I still wanted to work at Google, right? That sounded pretty good to me. So the interview itself, I only did part 1 of the interview. I was about to schedule part 2, and I took, the job offer that I had just because I was really, done proving myself at that point, and I felt like what I had there was pretty good. So basically, it was a phone interview, and this phone interview was with one person, and that person pretended to be my grandmother with a computer problem, and my job was to fix that problem. Now they designed it to where the issue ended up being a program that was logging too much to memory at one time and eating up all the memory. Now I don't think that's something that happens that often, or maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen it before, and I've fixed a lot of computers with this problem. I think the idea was to see the routes I would go. And I pulled out all the stops, checking the page file, checking everything, just trying to make sure there weren't any programs running, all that are eating up the processor, all of that stuff, and asked a lot of questions. And even though I had to be led to the answer pretty heavily by the end, I think that was the point, and they must have liked the way I thought because I did make it to round 2. I wish I could give you guys more information on what it would have gone like if I had moved on, but this was my life, not a little test, so I had to make that decision. Now, I will say the people at Google were extremely nice to me when I told them I didn't want to go on because I'd accepted another offer, and I mean, they were like congratulating me for it. So that was really cool. Honestly, I think that company is something good out there, and just based on the interview and talking to them, they were very supportive of me no matter what decision I made. That was really cool. Honestly, all of the interviews I've talked about here were really excellent, and all of the companies here that I've talked about that I have worked for at all have been really awesome. I can't say enough good things about any of them, or, yeah, basically they were really awesome. So let's do some basic interview advice. So the first thing you have to realize in an interview is that the people interviewing you, they want you to succeed. That's the thing. You may not know that, and the one thing you really don't want to do is get tense and nervous and close yourself off. Because if you do that, they can't do their job, because what they're really trying to do is figure out if you're right for the job. But they want you to be right for the job. Think about this. Say you're a kid and you want a new cell phone, and you convince your parents, you give the pitch on, why they should give you money for this cell phone. Now you've got a budget, they've given you, say, $500, and you're going to go looking at cell phones that are within that budget. And you want to find, you desperately, everyone you pull up, you want it to be the one, because you know it's within the budget, you want it to be the perfect one for you, right? That's what it's like to be a hiring manager, that they have to say, I need another person to help me. I need another person on this team. So they have to go to upper management to say, I need funding for this. I need money to hire another person. So they're going to get, so much they can do, and they're going to go looking for people. So the good thing about cell phones is you can just go on the internet and look at them. With people, you have to pull them in and talk to them and figure out who they are in a fairly short period of time. So they want you to be the person that checks that box, or all the boxes, I should say. The box that you're going to accept that salary, which you're there, so you probably will, unless they haven't told you, in which that's when they're hoping on. And beyond that, they want you to be the person that fits that role. When they ask you questions, you need to deal with them well. And especially if you're new, like I was in most of these interviews, they know that you're new. They know you're fresh out of college, and they don't expect you to know everything. In fact, they know that the senior people don't know everything, right? They know that they hit things that where they don't know what to do all the time. So don't try to be like, either I know everything or I'm going to close myself off, right? If you're asked something that you don't really know, the best thing to do is do your best on the question and think out loud, right? Say I'm asked about, what is this thing? And I'm like, well, I've heard of it. Say I don't really have any experience with it. I say, I've heard of it. I've read about it. I heard this, and this about it. But if I'm being honest, I haven't actually worked with it myself. I am interested in it. And then say, well, you might not want to lie. If it's something that you absolutely know that you hate, you may not want to say that you're interested in it. But generally, if you're in tech, you're interested in most things. So you can say you're interested in it. But then if you didn't give enough there, basically ask them about it. Be curious right in front of them. Say, what is it? What are you guys using it for, right? And they can go into it and talk to you about it, and hopefully as they talk to you about it, they can hit on things that you do know, and you can say, okay, well, I have experience in this, and I've actually been curious about getting into, say, a different framework or something like that, or use a different operating system. So show your interest, even if you just totally miss like a question, even a technical question. If you don't know a technical question, say why you don't know it. I would say that I had one question in an interview that was a best practice question that was pretty difficult, because best practice can be a bit of an opinion, but also something that we don't just study in school or even in internships. We usually just try to get things working. So there I had to say, I think it's this way. I wasn't taking a wild guess, but I just had to say I wasn't sure, and then talk through why that is the way it is in a technical interview with the person interviewing you, to show them that even though you didn't know the answer to the question, you would have missed it in Jeopardy, but you can figure it out, right? And you can work with them to learn it, and if they teach it to you, you can pick up on it. So that's when you're first starting out, that's really important. They're not looking for someone that knows everything. In fact, sometimes they're looking for a blank slate. So if you can show them that you're a blank slate that has a personality that they can work with and would like to work around, and you can learn things, you can get accustomed to this job, that's going to make you a good candidate. And I'm not saying a lie about who you are or anything. Kind of be the person that you want to be. Act as the person who you want to be, right? I don't think that's unfair. Yeah, maybe you're acting, right? But you're acting as the person that you want to be, and hopefully you will be someday. Play that role of, this is the, Mark that I want to be. And, you can be yourself. I recommend being yourself. Trying to hide yourself, they'll see you're doing that, right? They'll know. You'll be closing yourself off at that point. And if you don't show any kind of humanity, these days in software and in IT, that might not look good. That might not look, it may look like you're one of those people that doesn't talk and keeps to themselves. And these days, everything is a team-based environment. You have to be able to work with other people. Things are too big to do alone. You're going to have to work with lots of people all the time, no matter what tech field you're getting into. So I hope that advice helps, and I hope my stories helped you. I'm probably going to do some more videos about, especially like working at ServiceNow. That's what I've been wanting to do for a while because it was a heck of an experience. And if you like this channel, please subscribe to it. If you like my video, you can like it and then subscribe to the channel. And if you don't like it, I guess dislike it. And there's my Twitter down below. So everyone have a good day.